significant figures, we're using all of the same rounding rules that you learned in a lot of your earlier math classes. The difference for us is that we sometimes care exactly which digit you're rounding to. So sometimes I might say round 2 significant figures, sometimes I might say round 4 significant figures. So we're going to practice with these examples on page 11 of your packet. First example is 500.9, and then it says 3SF. So that means we want to round that 500.9 to 3 sig figs. Well, the sig fig rules say that we always have to start from the left. Okay, so rule number 1 says from the left, count off how many sig figs you need, and we're going to underline that place. That way we know that's where the last sig fig is allowed to take place. So we have 1, 2, 3, and that 0 is going to be the last significant figure we're allowed to have. Anything after that 0 is going to have to go away. Now, our second rule is what we always have learned about rounding, which is if the next digit is greater than 5, we have to round up that last sig fig. So that 9 is going to make this number round up to 501. Instead of 500.9, we've rounded up to 501. We're going to change everything after that last place to a 0, and if those zeros are after a decimal, erase them. So we can just erase the 0.9 because we rounded up, right? If you have $500.90 in your bank account, you might just say, I have $501, and that's what we're saying. So 501 is the way to round 500.9 to just 3 significant figures. If we look at example 2, we need to round this value to 2 significant figures. Now remember that leading zeros are not considered significant. So our second sig fig is this second 3 right here, which means everything after that we're going to have to round off. So that number is a 5, which means that that 3 that we underlined has to round up. So we're going to round up to 0.34 because that 5 rounded that last 3. Now, we don't want any more sig figs after that, and 0.335 does round to 0.34. That number makes sense, and they're very similar, so we're done with our problem. Remember, each of these rules only helps you if you get to a point where you're not done. You have to keep going to the next rule. So if we look at example number 3, we need 3 significant figures. So I'm going to underline the 8 because that's our last sig fig. And now the 9 and the 4 are both after that 8, which means both of those numbers are going to have to go away. The 9 will round the 8 up, so we will get 6.09. That makes sense. 6.0894 should round to 6.09, and our answer has 3 significant figures, so we're done. Question number 4. We select the first 2 significant figures. 0. We're going to round off that 901. The 9 rounds up, so that will become 2.1 because we rounded up. All of the other digits, 9, 0, and 1, are going to go away because we don't need them, and we have 2 significant figures in an answer, and that answer makes sense. Now, question 5 is where it starts to get a little bit more complicated, so let's look at that. If we look at question 5, we need 2 sig figs, so this 4 will be the last significant figure, and this 1 and 0 are going to have to go away. They can't be significant. So the 1 does not round up, so that means we're just left with 4 and 4 that are significant figures. Now, if you look at that number for a minute, does that make sense? Can the number 441 round up to 44? If you were in your bank account and they decided to just round to sig figs, 440, could that ever turn to $44? No, you'd be really mad. So there's something wrong with this number. A number that starts as 400 something needs to end as 400 something. So this is where we get to some of those rules that we haven't addressed yet. What we need to do is change everything after the underlined 4 to a 0. So we already had 1.0, so now we're going to call it 0.0. Well, if we look at that, that doesn't make sense either, because trailing zeros that have a decimal are significant. So now we went from 4 sig figs to 4 sig figs. So we need to continue on. So if any of those zeros are after a decimal, we're going to start erasing them until we get down to just 2 significant figures. So I'm going to erase this 0. Now we have 3 significant figures left, because remember, if there's a 0 with a decimal, even if the decimal is behind that 0 is significant. So now we need to erase the decimal. Once we erase the decimal, we have an answer of 440, which makes sense based on our original value of 441, and it makes sense with our sig fig rules because there is only 2 significant figures in that answer. Question number 6 is going to be similar, so let's look at question number 6. We're going to underline the third significant figure. Everything after that will have to go away. So the 0 and the 5, this 0 is not going to round up, so we're going to be left with 665. Now, just like before, that number started off as 66,000, and now it's only 600. So this doesn't make sense. This answer is not an appropriately rounded answer. So when that doesn't make sense because our number went from 66,000 to 600, we need to start putting those zeros back in where they belong. So everything that we erased, we're going to put back in as zeros. Now our number is still 66,000 because we have the same number of digits in our number, and those zeros are not significant because there's no decimal there. So that is the correct answer. What if we look at number 7? What if it has 4 significant figures? It's the same number as before, as in question number 6, but now we have 4 significant figures, so we just have to add an extra significant digit. So everything after that last number is going to round away, so we're going to be left with 6, 6, 5, and a 1. A 1 because that 5 rounds that 0 up. And just like before, 66,000 cannot become 6,000. We've lost too many digits, so that doesn't make sense with what we learned, back in 3rd grade when we were learning all those rounding rules. So we have to put those zeros back at the end. So we changed a 5 to a 0, and now this digit makes sense. We have 4 significant digits, and the number is still in the same range as before.